Hello, everybody. We are DebateSensei. We got Tim CV from San Diego. Hello.
Staying classy. How are you, man?
Yeah, all right. I'm Jared Kubik-Miller, debate coach, professor of communications. Matt isn't with us today. He is starting his sommelier licensing.
Is he?
Yeah.
He told me that he was starting with Capri Sun. And I didn't know what that meant, but like, I guess it's like a palate testing thing. Like you gotta, start with the fundamentals and work your way up to wine, I guess.
He's using it for toilet wine first.
Oh, okay. That's a good call. Yeah, you got to start somewhere. Good on him.
All right. Hey, we're back. So we are back on the first of the month. And the first of the month, we always not the first of the month, the first broadcast of the month. We like talking about single topics from recent debate tournaments and, trying to do as much of a deep dive as possible. This topic comes from, I didn't make a banner for it. I should have done that. This topic comes from the bronze medal round of the Fall Champs tournament for PSCFA. And Tim, you're the one who was there and picked up on it. Why don't you tell everyone what it is?
Yeah, we had our two of our two teams. So both of them advanced to the bronze rounds and one of them a little beyond. And that is resolved. The United States federal government should increase the use of artificial intelligence in policing. So USFG should significantly increase the use of artificial intelligence in policing.
Yeah.
So immediately there's a whole lot to unpack there, especially given just recent, background. There's a whole lot more technology that police forces are using. I think probably the most popular one that's getting a bunch of media play right now is San Francisco Police Department being granted permission to use lethal force with a remote-controlled robot. So,
wow.
There's no possible way that could go wrong, right? I've seen every science fiction movie, and it never starts that way. So there's a kind of a hot issue around what the limitations of police and where technology is useful and where it is harmful. But this one particularly, I think definitions are important because it's USFG. So it is not state police. It is not sheriff's departments. So, counties or tribal or anything like that. Federal government means you are dealing with the FBI and marshals, right? It's like state marshals or federal marshals.
So you might want to man, automatically I start thinking about when you point that out, I start thinking about cross-examination questions. If I was on the negative, especially, right?
Yeah.
If I've got that, I'm like, okay, so what federal laws is this enforcing? You know what I mean? And so you'd have to have federal applications to that. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And also, you're also looking at federal crimes. And so AI can be used in lots of different ways, right? But if you start applying it on things that are regulated on a state-by-state basis, you're now non-topical. So just making sure that your plan fits federal, things that fall under federal jurisdiction. I think that's an important one. So oftentimes there's a ton of overlap, right? So like drug enforcement can have different laws at state and federal levels, but there are some laws that are strictly federal, right? So interstate commerce is something that is uniquely a federal law, or things like immigration is uniquely federal, or there are some crimes that are federal offenses. So I think if you're using AI only in those circumstances, like cybercrime tends to be federally regulated, and that I think is probably the most likely and easy dovetail into AI. Before getting into the 1,000,010 awful things that can come out of this, I think there potentially also are some kind of cool, useful applications. Another, I guess, important word to define is artificial intelligence, because that can mean quite a few different things. And we've talked about this in the past in different contexts. But typically, you're dealing with some type of machine learning or some type of neural network where you're feeding in a large amount of data or allowing some system to continually accumulate a lot of data and then make decisions based off of that data. You draw deductions, bring up, cases, make whatever function. So it's, unless we're enabling the lethal robots with artificial intelligence, like there's probably a layer removed where, if law enforcement practices are only really being, brought forth, or they're only being executed by police officers, that starts to limit what AI can actually do, and therefore starts to limit the harms, but also starts to limit the solvency, right? So I think that's just a useful one that I would also start to pare down on the affirmative. Like, you've got an obligation to say, hey, AI can really only go so far. Like, here's what we're talking about.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I was looking up the definitions, and one of the things I got hung up on was the difference between AI and machine learning. Like, I'm not necessarily certain that would, like create any sort of, difference in the long term. But it is an interesting bit of trivia that machine learning is kind of considered a subset of AI.
Sure.
I'm like, and so my initial inclination was just to say, oh, let's just call it machine learning. But then I looked up a bunch of definitions. A lot of them are, it's like, okay, no, AI specifically is supposed to mimic human intelligence, some sort of human sort of ability. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I just thought it was like crunching a lot of data. And so so I have this one case, and then I started thinking, like, oh, does it even meet the definition of AI? And what this one case is that there's this new technology where drones are kind of set up throughout like a city, and they can detect gunshots.
Yeah.
Right. And so then they kind of launch, and they zero in on where the gunshots happened. And so I think one of my approaches, especially on the affirmative, is that when you're given something this sort of broad and almost philosophical, that you on the affirmative, it's best to kind of collapse down to a case.
Sure.
And so just we should detect shooters. You know what I mean? It's like, that's it. And if they come out, like, if my inclination on the negative is to critique the hell out of this. You know what I mean? It's
for sure. There's so many different directions to go there.
Yeah. And so on the affirmative, my strategy is a little bit more, it's like, okay, if your critique is true, then it should apply to this case. And so let's see if it really applies to like detecting shooters. Does it fall under, the problems that you're talking about? And so, but then I'm starting thinking, like, oh, well, detecting gunshots. I mean, I have an article that says it uses AI technology, so I think I would meet on that level. But I guess detecting gunshots is kind of a human thing that we do, from other sounds, stuff like that. So.
But the thing is, it's not just that those drones detect it; they hear it, launch, and then zero in and start filming, like they start recording, right? And transferring that information back to law enforcement. So I think any critique that you're going deep on, like, invasion of privacy, 100% links, right? Because I don't think that there's a whole lot of information or a whole lot of ways that you could use AI that would not be an invasion of privacy. Okay, I've got one though. So interesting one on the drones though. What's actually kind of cool, there's someone that we work with on the marketing company side, and a technology they're using are drones that are tethered to police vehicles. So they don't technically count as drones. What they're called is digital kites or something to that effect. And like, so they meet FAA regulations and things because there's a cable that connects them, so they can't like go off and fly on their own. But it gives law enforcement this think like top down, God's eye view, like video game type view around their cruiser with several hundred feet of visibility in every direction, so they can see anything moving on around them, which is pretty cool, like useful application, so long as you're on the side of the police, right? Like, so long as you're like, yeah, police good and police solves. So one area that I think would be a useful, worthwhile case that would probably have some traction is in detection. So facial recognition is one of the most popular applications, right?
Yeah.
So biometric scanning. So going through millions and millions of pictures really fast and being able to identify, like pick out faces in crowds, or, pick out, images of contraband or whatever the thing happens to be. One of the useful ones would be in the like detection of child pornography. So like cutting down on child pornography is a common proposed application for it, because you can get like facial recognition and stuff. Then there's all kinds of things that, Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and all the various companies already use to try and fight back on that. But it's up to them to then report that up the chain to law enforcement, and barriers, whatever in the way. So I think that's one avenue that actually you might say is not an invasion of privacy, because anything that's out there is willingly published by people, especially if it's really nefarious and like, super evil in that case. Yeah, that should probably be caught. And if we can catch that more effectively, I think you've got some solvency that maybe doesn't link into the invasion of privacy quite as badly.
Yeah,
like if it's information that's already submitted.
Yeah, I would shy away from the facial recognition, but when you're like saying like the child pornography sort of application of that, I think that would be good app stuff. It seems like most of the research when you put in AI policing is always about predictive policing, and like
which is
I'm like,
oh my god,
stay away from that. Like
stuff, right?
On the affirmative, I don't know. My instinct is do not talk about predictive policing.
Oh my god, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's
stay away from that is like the plague.
I don't know. Like, I mean, like maybe some other people think that maybe there's some applications that other people know about, but just I think that really does link into a lot of the critical positions. And I think that on the negative, you want to be fighting for that all of this is predictive. Like, even if you don't call that, even the gunshot detection thing could be somewhat predictive,
And then that's what AI is, right? It's drawing conclusions. Like intelligence is not taking information and then it's not deduction, right? Like that's not where typical artificial intelligence comes in of like, here's this thing and then let me zero down onto something. It's induction of like, based on all of these things, all these inputs, what is the likely next sequence? So it kind of by nature, I feel like if I were on the negative, I would go hardcore T on artificial intelligence and start digging into like, this has to be inductive, where it's drawing new conclusions, therefore forcing something predictive, right? Like, or just where it's used even. There's so much I want to get into on the negative, but there's actually one other thing I wanted to throw out there on the affirmative, just as a potentially cool, function of where that could be used. And that's in like cybercrime. So using AI to crack down on fraud, to catch more cases of like, spoofing, spam, phishing, whatever. And I think that while it's really, really unsexy, that is a super worthwhile area to crack down on, right? Because it's like a multi-billion-dollar industry, and like it is definitely like high victim crimes. Like it's not just, random money moving around. Like it's real people that's lives are ruined by, fraud and scam and phishing and things. So, and that is federal crime, right? So it's the FBI that's in charge of that. And you can chalk up how like the FBI is terrible at it. So if we're able to use more artificial intelligence to crack down on more of these things, maybe that could help, keep dollars in pockets. So you're probably not getting to like save a lot of lives, but you're at least, helping stop some, crippling financial activities.
I think, and I kind of wanted to, when I'm on the affirmative, I also think about what I'm going to say in rebuttals sometimes, you know what I mean? And so when, what I mean in this particular case is that I know what's coming out is that there's that artificial intelligence has bias built in.
For sure.
And so my rebuttal, I'm like, okay, more bias than police now? Like, I mean, like that's the question, like, like, are you saying that the way we're doing policing now is less biased than the way artificial intelligence is going to do it? I think there are definitely arguments you can make that is, but it's at least opening the door. It's kind of like, listen, we're not doing AI or perfection. It's like we're doing AI or squo. You know what I mean? You're defending the squo.
So, I mean, all right, so it's too juicy. Getting into it, that is like the very first point, right? Discriminatory AI already has a whole bunch of warrants. Like you've got a bunch of use cases where when just given free license, like various chatbots have become really racist. Or like artificial intelligent, like just, pseudo-sentient bots that go out on, chat rooms, or that are like asked to go retrieve information, or that like create accounts and things, end up saying and doing super racist things. And it's because they're gathering it from the internet, which is an awful place. So I think if I'm on the negative, I'm going to say that like any bias that exists right now is supercharged by AI because we're not feeding it perfect, clean data. Like there's no such thing as unbiased information that we can float into it. All police reporting data, which is what we'd be flowing into it, is already biased. So we're starting it off on a bad foot, and then we're giving it no, ethics or morality that we're programming into this thing. And so it's just going to go even further and make it worse. I think that's the biggest disadvantage that I've got is just like supercharges any existing bias. Any and all.
Yeah. So like you could like, I would say, I would get even critical on that one. It's like, because, and this is a true critique, because what you're doing is like, fundamentally, there is no way to get rid of bias in artificial intelligence, right? And so when I think about like critiques are supposed to be like addressing fundamental, unavoidable principles that you're right. It's like that everything's supposed to be based upon. And in this case, it's a little bit more tangible because we're talking about like real AI, with code and stuff like that. And well, it's not necessarily the code itself. It's the, like you're saying, the input and how it's treated. Right. And so when you like the garbage in, garbage out saying, it's that if you're putting in, human sort of biases, then you're going to get like them. Not only is it supercharged, I think like I would talk about structural racism, and that this is like, it's basically imbuing the structure with even more sort of irremovable. You can't get rid of it now because it's like part of it. You know what I mean? It's like it
almost legitimizes it too, right?
Because like, have you seen an algorithm? I haven't seen an algorithm. I've talked about them, you know what I mean? But like when I look at it, it's like even if I saw one, I wouldn't know how to tell. And so it makes it seem objective when it's not. Yeah,
it legitimizes it because it gives it this like magical polish of like, oh, but that's the latest and greatest new technology, and that new technology can do anything. Like, look at all the great stuff it does. Like, I think AI is used pretty regularly now as this like panacea of like, oh, we can use it to solve XYZ things. Yeah. And I think that ends up giving huge justification and like undue legitimacy to these underlying biases, right? So like just one example is they were talking about as it relates to gunfire detection, what areas they police. That's already a super biased nature of policing. So, right, just status quo, humans, some cities over-police the hell out of some areas that tend to be Black and brown areas, right? And there's all kinds of like statistical evidence to point these things out. Or there's all kinds of, studies and things that have gone into what areas are policed significantly more than others. And crime rates end up being reported based on where the police are, which kind of makes sense, right? Like the analogy being like follow, anyone for 500 miles on the freeway and you're guaranteed to pull them over for something. So when you flood policing into areas that are predominantly minority and predominantly like, impoverished areas, like, yeah, those areas are going to appear to have higher crime rates because the police are incentivized to, crack down on crime. So when you're then feeding that information in, where are you going to be putting up these?
So I'd be able to. The reason I like these, by the way. So Kyle, hey, glad that you're speaking up. Let us know what you want us to talk about in the future, and we'd love to sort of cater to the topics you want. But that's why like the affirmative on the gun detection thing. I think I get to build in some answers to that because like the system doesn't get triggered unless you have a specific sound that reaches a certain decibel level. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the information that's getting fed into the system. It's not like what this white cop thinks gunshots sound like. And, like, so it's like there's information that, like specifically gunshots that isn't really based upon, your belief systems or frameworks or worldviews or anything like that. It's kind of like you can measure it with a decibel and you can triangulate where it's occurring. Maybe it's a backfiring car, but when we fly in and say, oh, it's an old ass car, then we leave. It's like that one kind of like, all right, if your critique is true, then in this situation we should be able to find it. And like, I don't know, like I think that there's some good answers that you can make for that.
Well, I think your plan would have to be that is implemented everywhere evenly, though, right? Like you need to have, because decibel meters or whatever they're super attuned microphones can only reach so far. So do you have a ton of those microphones in suburban neighborhoods, or do you have a ton of those microphones downtown already? Like you're starting to, where this technology is implemented, I think is still a reflection of the bias, or at least if I'm on the negative side, I'm going to start trying to nail it too. Like you can't remove the bias from these things. Like even if you're taking in objective information, how the tool and where the tool is being used are still reflections of the biases of the law.
Those are really good questions. Yeah, I would like on CX. That would, oh man,
like where are you putting this stuff?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, like you can come up with like witty responses like public schools.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's pretty good. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's not bad, but like, I don't want to diminish, the point that you're making, because it's a really important one. You know what I mean? Like, I think that
it's impossible to divorce the bias from the policing.
Yeah. Like geographically speaking, I'm like, oh, we should do it in population centers. I'm like, well, yeah, like let's start thinking about population centers and what sort of demographics we're looking at there. It's like, it's not neutral, you know what I mean? And so, yeah. Like, I mean, here's a weird analogy, but there's like a stat that I saw about like road deaths by accident, car accidents in Washington, D.C. versus car accidents in Wyoming. And Washington, D.C. isn't even a state, but it has more people in it than Wyoming, right? And so you look at like the thousands of people that die in traffic accidents and you're like, oh man, Wyoming must be really safe. It's like, well, on a per capita basis, more people die in traffic accidents in Wyoming, right? So like, like being a driver in Wyoming is actually more dangerous than being a driver in Washington, D.C. But the statistics make it seem like it's like, oh, you want to avoid that place. So that's the type of information that gets fed into artificial intelligence, right? You know what I mean? And then they come to, it's like, oh, well, we should be, I don't know, flying more drones in this area more often and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think that's already a safer, potentially, that's a safer plan. There are many plans that I think they could go a whole lot worse, but I'm trying to think if I were to go with like the safest version, I think like cybercrime still probably meets the definition, right? Like if you're using artificial intelligence to detect and prevent fraud, right? Or detect and prevent like phishing scams or password detection or whatever. So internet crime, definitely less exciting, right? Like you're not like saving lives with that for the most part, probably. You're mostly like saving people's dollars and passwords and like convenience and whatever. Still, I mean, lots of dollars, but I'm trying to figure out where the critique still gets into that. Because I guess it's still individuals' passwords that are being stolen. So without access to devices, without access to email accounts, AI probably doesn't solve anything. Like it doesn't do anything because it would need to see inside people's own, like it needs to see inside the doors to see who's breaking in. But at least that's maybe my just stupid understanding of it. But in doing so, that's a huge violation of privacy, right? Unless it's invited in, unless it's like, oh yeah, everyone go download the U.S. federal government's anti-cybersecurity app onto your phone. We promise we're not watching you. Good luck. So maybe there's just no solvency to that.
You can get a little bit, I don't know, like one of my first instincts, it's not always the best, but like I start questioning inherency. I'm kind of like, aren't they kind of already doing this? Or like, are you proposing anything new? Or is this just like you taking a stand saying that's a good thing? Like, is it not a policy debate now? Or like, because if so, what is this new AI that they are using for cyber like crime that, I push people on that at least to get a little footing, like, because it has to be some sort of increase, right? It has to be some sort of new, yeah. And so I'm like, what are you doing that's new that they aren't doing already? And so,
I think that would be my immediate research is just into like, are there any proposed bills or are there any new policies or are there anything like requisitions? Like the FBI is trying to get access to, XYZ piece of technology that's going to really help stuff, but they can't do it right now because of funding or because of whatever thing, and see if that would help and just look through what the application of that is. Because I imagine there are always novel and interesting ways that artificial intelligence can be used. And it feels like the FBI is kind of doing absolutely nothing in terms of like prosecuting fraud. Like the number of spam texts, it's no longer just emails. It's no longer just phone calls. The number of spam texts that I get daily is stupid. Like, and it's constant. And then you start, going backwards into email and everything like that. And it's like a barrage, an absolute barrage constantly. So without some way to track that, right? Like some way to crack down on that, I would imagine it would maybe have to do with something like, where are the most emails being sent at, like flagged, take all of the flagged emails and then start doing some kind of reverse triangulation to figure out where these things are being sent from. Maybe it's a manner of decryption, like you need AI to help like decrypt some of the firewalls that are being sent from behind or whatever the thing is. But just trying to figure out where the majority of these things are being sent from. As I understand, though, it's an international issue. So again, if I'm on the affirmative side or the negative side, I'm going to be just banging down solvency there. Like, good for you, FBI. You're still not able to stop this because you can't stop people in Russia from sending bot traffic or from sending spam emails or from doing whatever. So all the AI in the world, you're not going to stop.
What? Oh man. Now you triggered a horrible thought. United States federal government could also be the army.
Oh, I mean, yeah, because it's world policing, right?
Oh man.
The plan is Team America.
Oh no! AI. Why did I not think of that? Oh my god!
Oh man, actually.
Oh, how did I miss that?
Yeah, just go all in. Like, we're gonna fund hundreds of billions of dollars into AI to like cripple the Russian network.
Yeah, I mean, it could be CIA too, because CIA goes international. Sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's still USFG, right? Like,
oh man,
I think it's the Air Force that actually has some of the biggest cyber warfare disciplines. I think just because they otherwise aren't used all that much. Like, aircraft are mostly launched from the Navy, so it's like naval pilots, and so like the Air Force themselves don't have a ton to do. So I think that's why they route so much cyber through them. But yeah, it might be the CAA. Could be because NSA is just domestic for the most part, right? I don't know, but in any case, yeah, I think if you could go over policing of like, how are we going to stop stuff internationally? Huh?
Yeah, like, I didn't even think about it. You said, "Oh, you can't do anything international." I'm like, well, hell.
Yeah, your links are now
agent. You can. Bigger. Holy moly! Oh, I can't believe I feel stupid sometimes. It's like we went like 25 minutes. If this were around, I'm like, oh my god, we got to switch it. It's like, oh.
Well, yeah, we were already out of prep, right? So I'm still researching like what can the FBI do, but international. I think like breaking up human trafficking was another one that came up at the tournament. Like some case that was run of like human trafficking tends to be facilitated over like surreptitiously through internet channels. So like there are online, ways that human trafficking rings coordinate. And so using AI to break up those kinds of things. So when you've got like the worst of the worst harms and like any solvency there is huge upside, those are really great cases to run. Like that's a really solid plan. Especially if you know that it's already run online and like the potential for downside there, I feel like is lower.
Well, yeah, like on the human trafficking one, there's actually an app that I saw in a persuasion round where they asked people to take pictures of their hotel rooms because a lot of human trafficking, they take photos of their of the victims and the hotel room in the background is very, at least somewhat telling. And then they use AI to actually not look at the face, but it's not facial recognition, it's room recognition.
Yeah. I mean, it's all still patterns and shapes and signatures and whatnot. Yeah, that's actually really interesting. So that could be, I mean, hell, whoever wrote that persuasion should have a good case right there already with a bunch of research to back it. Yeah.
That's and that's interesting because then you could just have like the United States USFG just kind of,
document every hotel room.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like man.
So I think there actually exists some affirmatives that are not quite as scary as it sounds like you're forced to do. Like you don't have to go build, T3000s, but at the same time, like you could still solve some things. So I think it's a meaty topic. I like the resolution.
But like what we said at the very beginning, though, is that you don't want to go for the sort of, I don't know, on the affirmative, I wouldn't go big picture principled sort of thing. Like we should just be AI is good and here's why
and use it for everything.
Yeah.
That's okay. So one thing that I did want to like nail down more specifically, do you have any like, theories, any frameworks, any particular, philosophies or things that you would start pulling, any lit base that you would pull in for particular critiques on this one?
You know what? There was one. As I was doing research for this discussion, I was coming across the surveillance state, and I was thinking that that might be the name, because we were talking about racism, which I think is the right up front. Just don't ignore that, please. Like bring that up. But the surveillance state in general, about how that I think there's a lot to unearth there. That even if you are sort of combating these really horrible crimes, the climate that you are creating with the surveillance state, will just cause intergenerational stuff. It's kind of like Minority Report level stuff.
Yeah,
it's like, great, you're preventing a whole lot of crimes, but look at the cost.
Right.
And so it was Minority Report, showing our age.
Yeah, I was like, man, that's a dated movie at this point. Like, really?
Yeah. Oh, what? God, what would be?
It helps. The fact that it's still topical, I guess. Like, kudos to them.
It is. Yeah. What would be the more recent version of that? I wonder. Oh, now that's trivia. Man, anyone watching this, you got to let us know.
Whatever.
Yeah, you got to let us know what's the modern version of Minority Report. Yeah. Oh man. Well, hey, everybody, that is our time. Okay. We'd love for you to come back next week. We'd even love more to hear what sort of topics you want to have us discuss for you. All right. So we are Tim, Jared, and we might have another one with us next week. All right. All right, everyone. So thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Stay class.